One of the first games I covered on my channel was A Space for the Unbound. I knew back then that I stumbled upon something great, but I didn't know what I didn't know. A Space for the Unbound was in development for 6 years before it landed on my radar. And now that it's here, yeah, this game is different. Normally, I don't struggle with writing these videos, but with a game like this one, I was kind of stumped. Big thank you to, I think it's pronounced Toge Productions for sending me the review code. They said I was important, so. After finishing this game, I immediately ran to my PC in order to document my thoughts, but I was puzzled. How much should I talk about? I got the game early, and as of this video's release, fans still have a whole day before they can get their hands on the game. The video is going to have spoilers, but how much should I share? With a game as important, beautiful, and charming as this one, where do you start? How about the beginning? A Space for the Unbound starts by introducing us to the two most important pieces to the puzzle that is this game's narrative. You play as Atma, a high school student and mentor to the young and creative character Nirmala. Nirmala is an aspiring writer who relies on Atma to help her finish a story that's very important to her. Within the first 10 minutes, the game gets you outside and engaging with this world and its gameplay loop. The game can be split into 3 pillars: exploration, combat, and puzzles, aka space dives. The space dive mechanic is the bread and butter of the game. The player, armed with a magical red book, is able to dive into the subconscious of people and help them with their emotional mental blocks that's keeping them from achieving their goals. This is a direct representation of Atma's role in Nirmala's life. This mechanic is very similar to the sync machine in Spike Chunsoft's AI Somnium Files series. However, the gameplay once you're in the space dive is way more streamlined. In order to help people through these mental blocks, usually you have to solve some sort of puzzle, some of which require items from outside of the person's mind. If you play like I did, this isn't a problem usually, because if you interact with everything you come across, you will always have the items you need before you space dive, cutting back on some of the backtracking. Navigating the game's world is fun for the most part. The people usually all have something of value to say. Some NPCs provide hints about progression, some give insight into the other NPCs, and some even have funny references to pop culture. There are also plenty of collectibles for those completionist gamers, and most of them are pretty easy to find. The real joy of navigating this game's map is just how beautiful and alive everything looks. The pixel art and color palette brings these maps to life, and it never got old during the 11 hours I played. I found myself getting lost and backtracking a lot, but it never frustrated me because I almost always found myself in areas I had never seen before, with new NPCs to talk to, new collectibles, and new items that could help me as I progressed through the main story and the side content. The 90s Indonesian setting spoke to me because it's a country that doesn't get enough love when it comes to video games. And I don't know if y'all have seen Indonesia, but it is absolutely gorgeous. Mojiken Studio did a fantastic job capitalizing on that beauty, and honestly, playing the game evoked a sort of nostalgia for a place I've never been to, for a lifestyle I've never lived. Is there a word for that? There is a word for that. The word I'm thinking of is anamoya, nostalgia for a time you've never known. Or you know. The combat in A Space for the Unbound is relatively basic, but it doesn't detract from the overall experience. In the early stages of the game, it felt well suited for the gameplay. However, as the game progressed, I found myself wishing for more depth and complexity in the combat. It's worth noting that while it may feel underdeveloped, it fits well within the context of Chapter 2, but I would have loved to see it expanded upon in later sections of the game. The game introduces more gimmicks as the game progresses. In Chapter 3, the space dive puzzles are simplified court segments similar to the Ace Attorney games. You have to gather evidence and present it in a court setting, and sometimes Atma even says objection. I chuckled when I came across this part of the game, but it's also left a bit to be desired. I'm not asking for the devs to reinvent the wheel or anything, but I wish these puzzles had a tiny bit more depth. Also, this is a great time to talk about how space dives work. As you completed tasks in a space dive, a flower would bloom on this intertwined vine, but sometimes the flower would be yellow and other times it would be blue. This gave me the impression that the game may have branching paths, but I couldn't figure out a way to consistently trigger both flower colors. For most of the game, progressing the space dives would cause the yellow flower to blossom, which makes sense for story reasons, but in Chapter 3, during one of the court segments, I accidentally picked the wrong evidence and the blue flower blossomed. If I would have purposely fudged the court segments, would the chapter end in a different way? Or was the blue flower just letting me know I could only fuck up so many times before getting a game over? I don't know, I wasn't able to test my theory due to time constraints, so I ignored it, but still, I wonder. The point is, the mechanics brought in over the course of the game stayed on the simple side, and while most people probably wouldn't mind the simple nature, I do wish the combat and courtroom mechanic, and honestly most of the puzzles had a little bit more depth. But can I talk about a late game puzzle real quick? Spoilers, of course. Here's the timestamp to skip this portion, because again, late game spoiler, and this game is way better if you go in blind. But can I please just Moji Studio? How do I solve this puzzle? I mean, I did solve it, I beat the game, I saw the credits, but the way I solved this puzzle was through straight up brute forcing it. This Karate Boy puzzle makes zero sense to me. So, in this guy's space dive, you have to open a locker, but the combination is tied to panels of this comic book. The hint, or at least my interpretation of the hint, tells us that the first number is tied to a panel of an elbow attack. The second number is tied to a panel of a kick attack, and the third is tied to a panel of a punch. Seems pretty straightforward, but where my confusion is, how are these two correlated? I assumed the number in the locker combination was tied to the number of panels, so I went to count the panels, but what is the proper way to count the panels? Do I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on? Or is it 1, 2, 3, pause, 1, 2, 3, 4? I'm sorry, I'm just confused here. Also, which panel do I use? There are 4 instances of the elbow attack. There are 5 instances of the kick, 15 punches. I have no idea what I'm doing here. I thought I was missing something, but after backtracking through the areas I could explore over and over again, I realized now I'm just a big dum-dum and I couldn't figure out how to solve this puzzle. I was stumped because normally when I can't solve a puzzle, I just look it up. But no, I got the game early. Who was I gonna call? Mr. Bojikin himself? This part makes me so sad because most of the game's puzzles are very well telegraphed to the player in my opinion, but this one just seemed out of left field. I'm hoping I just skimmed over dialogue somewhere and that's why I was struggling so hard, but this was the only point in the game where I wasn't having fun. And the craziest part is that the puzzle right after this is my favorite puzzle in the game. It was actually fun getting a piece of paper and banging out a formula to get the code to unlock this other locker. Someone please tell me what I was doing wrong. What was I doing wrong? The game's story explores some very interesting themes of creativity, mental illness, self-doubt, and anxiety. It really explores what it means to be creative and how artists deal with the hardships of the world, and the narrative touched me in a way that few games have. The main character Nirmala is so relatable. The scenes of her and her parents brought back some crazy memories of my own upbringing. Man, I need to get some fucking therapy. Few games have ever brought me to tears, but this game did it on 2 occasions. And any game that can evoke that feeling is something that is magical in my book. There were a few aspects of the game's narrative that kind of left me like, huh? But the questions I have about the game's narrative would probably be answered in a second playthrough. A Space for the Unbound is a unique and captivating game that sets the bar high for the rest of the year in gaming. The game's stunning visuals, engaging gameplay, and heartfelt story make it a must-play for any gaming enthusiast. With its release on every console and gaming store tomorrow, I highly recommend picking it up and experiencing it for yourself. I would like to extend another big thank you to Toge Productions. Is it Toge? Please tell me it's Toge. To Toge Productions for providing me with an early access key, and to Mojikin Studio for creating a game that I will treasure forever.